Good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025 meeting of the LaSalle Town Council to order. I'd like to read the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original peoples across Turtle Island. I'd ask you be quiet for a moment of silent reflection, followed by the playing of the national anthem. Please rise for the playing of the national anthem. Thank you very much. We'll begin with our order of business. First, the adoption of the agenda. A recommendation of the July 22nd, 2025 regular council meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Renner, seconded by Councillor Burns. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest for my council colleagues on any items on the agenda. If during the course of the meeting you realize you have a pecuniary interest, please let me know and we'll advise the clerk accordingly. D, adoption of the minutes, that the minutes of the closed and regular meetings of the council held July 8th, 2025 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Ricci Spagnolo, seconded by Councillor Reno. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Mayor's comments. Obviously, Mayor Meloche is out of town tonight. I've got some comments from her. So some suggestions. Tonight's residents' water and wastewater billing is due Friday, July 25th. We have a LaSalle night market this Sunday, July 27th. Please come out from 4 to 8 at the LaSalle Civic Center. It is the perfect spot to spend a wonderful evening in LaSalle. The LaSalle Civic Center and Volmer Center will be closed for Civic Holiday Monday, August 4th. If you're looking for some fun activities, enjoy our trails, the Loop and the Rotary Circle. Of course, the new amenities at the LaSalle Landing. I've seen the splash pad at the Volmer as well, not to mention other activities to get out and enjoy our weather, pickleball and tennis, and we hope you have a wonderful, enjoyable, long weekend. F, public meetings and hearings, we have none. Moving to G, presentations and delegations. And then staff reports and correspondence from council's actions. I call upon Ed Thiessen, Fire Chief, to present his report. Chief.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and members of council. So the tiered response agreement is an agreement that historically has required to be updated annually. In the latest revision and the revision in front of you, it is going to be automatically renewed going forward, but we do have an option to opt out if we choose to. There are some additional minor changes. So they've increased the annual funding for the defib replacement from $1,000 to $1,500 annually. And I'd just like to say that the train the trainer and the liaison officer designation that they mention in here, we've been participating in that training for at least 5 or 6 years. So there really is no other changes for the town of LaSalle. One of the things that we are expected to do moving forward is an electronic transmission of the medical report. So currently that's done by manually filling out a form and then scanning it to them. And they're expected that in the next few months that we will get some software where we can do it on the tablets that are already on our trucks. But I'm available should you have any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Looking to my council colleagues, any questions for the chief? My friend, go ahead, sir.
Thanks. Chief, just so we're clear, and I think I did have the opportunity to talk to you yesterday, so just to expand on how nothing's changed, but we still are backing up, just in case the ambulances or EMS can't get to a call or a serious event. Just want to make sure that that's still happening, and you always hear in the news that they're always delayed, or they're have a hard time getting there, or they're backed up at the hospital for unloading. So you just go over that real fast, if you don't mind.
Sure, through you, Deputy Mayor, thanks for the question. So they call that a code black, and it is mentioned within this agreement. I can honestly say that in LaSalle, we are not experiencing code black too very often. We are not responding to medical calls without EMS attending those calls as well. Last year, like this is a significant improvement this year over last year.
Thank you.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Mr. Reno.
Thank you. Just in regards to the new things that we have to do with the software that you say we may be getting, is that something that we've already budgeted for, or something that'll fall easily within our budget, or is this something we should expect to see coming in the future?
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. We don't expect to incur any costs for that. We're fortunate, we already have tablets in all of our fire trucks, so it would just be an app that's loaded on there, and like I can talk to the IT department, but I don't think that we'll be incurring any costs to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the chief on his report? If not, there's a recommend.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Councillor Reno, and support the recommendation of the report of the Director of Fire Service, the Fire Chief dated July 2nd, 2025, Fire 2025-05, regarding the renewal and update to the medical tiered response agreement with Essex Windsor EMS be received, and that bylaw 8119 be rescinded, and bylaw 2025-067 be adopted at the bylaw stage of the agenda. We've got a mover and a seconder. Is there any comments on the recommendation on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. H2, audited financial statements. Mr. Tano Fierro, Manager of Finance. The floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of Council. This evening we are presenting the 2024 audited financial statements for Council's approval. The financial statements will then be publicly available on the town's website, and the Finance Department will submit the statements and the 2024 financial information return to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. The town's financial process for 2024 began in 2023 in December when Council established the annual budget. Throughout the year, Finance Department completed thousands of transactions, from property tax billings and payments to vendor payments, and certainly many more transactions. The audited statements capture the town's financial activity for the year and the balances at the end of 2024. The town continues to be in a very strong financial position with high levels of cash reserves, amongst the highest per capita in the county, in fact, and very manageable debt levels, as we are currently utilizing just over 25% of our legislated debt capacity. Annually, the town receives a financial indicator report from the ministry, and historically, the town scores as low risk in all categories, and we do not anticipate any changes in this for this year. This evening, we have our external auditors from KPMG, Ms. Denbach and Ms. Pellerin, who will present KPMG's audit report, and I will be available for any questions after their presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
We can, you're a bit broken
you
and kind of
able to hear me?
choppy.
Okay, I wonder, I'm going to shut my video off. I'm getting a low bandwidth message, which is odd because I'm in my office, but I'm going to turn my video off and hopefully that will fix things. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. And my name is Katie Denbach. I'm the audit partner from KPMG for the town of LaSalle. And with me is Emily Pellerin, the audit manager responsible for the audit. What we would like to do with council this evening is just go through the highlights of the audit findings report, which Emily is sharing on her screen. Starting with the highlights, just a couple of items to draw your attention to here. And Emily will go through in a little bit more detail, but communicate to you under Canadian auditing standards, as well as anything that we feel would be important for you to be aware of in your governance roles over the external audit process. For the audit of the town this year, we used a materiality level of $2.8 million. That's the highest level threshold that we use to help scope and determine where there might be risks of material misstatements within the financial statements themselves. But the more important number for your purposes would be our audit misstatement posting threshold of $140,000. That's the level at which, if we did identify any audit misstatements, that we would report them to you through this report. And you'll see we do have a couple of adjustments we suggested, which were corrected in the financial statements that you see in this package. The next item I'll touch on is, Emily, if you could go to slide 6, please. Time that this report was prepared, we had a couple of procedures outstanding. Those have now been completed and we are ready to sign off on an unqualified or an unmodified auditor's report. The only remaining items at this point in time are having our discussions with council here this evening and obtaining evidence of the approval of the financial statements, which is one of the motions that's being asked of you today. After that, we will send a management representation letter to have signed, which is just standard procedure, and we are ready to finalize our auditor's report. And I'll hand it to Emily to walk through a
Emily, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Again, you're choppy, but we can now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Emily, if that was you, we can hear you now.
Okay, you can, okay. All right. Perfect.
We've lost you again.
All right. Nothing like some technical difficulties. So, page 7 here is where I wanted to start. So this controls. This is a significant risk. Okay.
Emily, we just heard you say significant risk, and that's all we can hear in the chamber.
Can you hear me now?
At this moment in time, we can, but we've lost the presentation on the screen.
Okay, maybe I will try stopping my screen share. share to see if that
Yeah, Emily, I
helps at
think
all.
that's part of the bandwidth.
Okay. All right. Hopefully you can hear me now, but if you lose me, let me know. So with the assumption that you have the presentation in front of you, I'll reference the page numbers that way. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Going over to page 7 on the presentation, this is where we've highlighted our significant risk of management override. Again, this is a risk that we look at each and every year, and for all of our audit clients. There is nothing new here. Our response is indicated on the screen, and we did not note any significant issues other than one control deficiency, which I will touch on in a subsequent slide. Moving to page 8, this highlights the new accounting standards under public sector auditing or accounting standards that were implemented during the year. The first one to note is with respect to revenue. Management performed their analysis of this to determine if any adjustments would be required. Through their assessment as well as ours, we determined that it was appropriate that no adjustments be made. The other two are public-private partnerships and purchased intangibles, and it was determined that there are no arrangements that exist that would fall under these standards. Moving to page 9, this highlights the financial reporting matters, specifically as it relates to the disclosures that have been added to the statements for the new standards that have been discussed. Moving to page 10, as Katie noted earlier, there were a couple misstatements that were identified. So there were 2 that management subsequently corrected. The first one was in relation to 2 assets that had been disposed of. However, it was determined that they were still in use, so this was reversed. And the second relates to property owners making overpayments on their accounts, and so the credit of their accounts was sitting against taxes receivables. We propose that this be reclassified to deferred revenue, as it'll be used in future years. So again, both of these are discussed further on the page, as well as within Appendix C, which is the management representation letter. Moving to page 11, this goes over our standard communications as it relates to control deficiencies, and page 12 specifically references the control deficiencies identified during the audit. So the first one that I briefly mentioned earlier relates to a significant control deficiency that is around a lack of review over the supervisor of accounting journal entries. Again, this has been identified as significant because it is related to the management override of control risk, so we have to look at it as a significant control deficiency. We have noted our...
Emily?
Yep. Can you...
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in there really quickly to add that this is something we see fairly commonly. The best practice does require a pretty fulsome level of review over journal entries because of the risk that Emily noted already. So this is a recommendation we put forward fairly frequently, and have just recommended here that some additional layer of review be put in place over just those specific entries, and not for any reason specific to LaSalle, but just as a matter of best practice when it comes to that process in general. Sorry, Emily, I'll let you continue on.
All right, and so continuing on page 12, the second deficiency noted is just in relation to the disposals error that was noted, and really just recommending that further review take place over disposals to make sure that they are truly no longer in use before those transactions get put through. Page 13 looks at how we as a firm deliver audit quality, and on the digital version of this report, there is a hyperlink there to take you to further information on our transparency report. Page 14 is our confirmation to you that we are independent of the town. And then page 15 is really the beginning of our appendices. So I'm not going to go into these in detail, but really the first Appendix A is our required communications. Appendix B and Appendix C are the draft audit report, which Katie mentioned is an unmodified opinion. Appendix C is our management representation letter. So you will find the misstatements noted in a schedule there. And then appendices D through F are just additional information for you around auditing and accounting standards, as well as other insights. That wraps up our presentation, but we will open it up if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. Looking at my council colleagues, I see Councillor Carrick. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I just reviewing maybe through you guys or even our own administration, when looking at the assets, the pages from the report there, 3 of 5 and then 2 of 3, there's 90% of the town's assets are in fair and better condition. Then you get down the line, it looks like it's a value of $109 million, and then you go to the next slide, and the pie is chopped up pretty good. So very good, good, fair, poor, and very poor. So there's over $100 million of poor and very poor. Is that normal, or is that, am I not reading this right? Because I know this is long-term stuff, replacements, but if some clarification around that would be appreciated.
Sure, through you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor, that actually pertains to the following report on asset management. So I believe that question would be suited for the following report.
Councillor Reno.
I'm going to direct this question for Tano just because there's a little bit of a communication with the computer going on. The $165,000 discrepancy between the reports where they said it was a concern, a major concern of some assets that were written off but possibly still in use. Could you just explain that whole concept a little bit just so we can understand how it ended up on the auditor's report?
Sure, through your worship, to the councillor. So there was 2 items noted on those items there for the that Ms. Pellerin discussed. The first, if I may, was the supervisor of accounting and journal entries. The town has not changed its practice in many, many years. That has historically been the town's practice, where the supervisor of accounting performs journal entries. And the treasurer and deputy treasurer review those entries through the variance reporting on a quarterly basis or monthly basis. KPMG has indicated that the best practice that we review each journal entry. So since the time writing of this report, we have implemented something where the deputy treasurer, myself, will review journal entries on a regular basis. With respect to the capital assets, there was in fact, I believe it was 2 items that were disposed of, and that they should not have been disposed of. So what we are doing, as you, council may recall, is that we have council approved further additions to the staffing and finance, and we will be working and reviewing and putting in place more controls on our capital assets and our financial planning. So those 2 things did happen, and we are putting in more controls to ensure that they do not happen again in the future.
Just as a follow-up, so those 2 items, we basically wrote them off, but they were still in use? Is that the long and short of it?
That's correct.
And will we be taking them out, or is that going to come off the report and keep them in use?
The corrections have already been made, and they are still in use.
Thank you.
Any of my other colleagues for either Councillor Carrick?
Just for, I guess, clarification from my part then, would the asset stuff not be flagged, or is it just the financial portion of the KPMG thing? Like, would that not, when you're looking at that kind of serious infrastructure down the road, would that not be part of their process to look at that, to flag it, to bring it to our attention?
In this case here, KPMG did bring it to our attention. It was in the audit findings report, and within our report, it's already been corrected.
Any of my other colleagues, any questions for Mr. Ferraro or the folks who are still online? Seeing none, there's a recommendation before us that the report of the Manager of Finance, Deputy Treasurer dated June 17th, 2025, Fin 11 2025 regarding the 2024 audited financial statements be received, and that council approve and adopt the 2024 audited financial statements, and that the 2024 audited financial statements be posted on the Town of LaSalle website, and that the 2024 financial statements and the 2024 financial information returns be submitted to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs in accordance with Section 294, Sub 1 of the Municipal Act. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Riccio Spagnolo, supported by Councilor Reno. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Ferraro will keep you in the batter's box for H3, the Asset Management Plan. Mr. Ferraro, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, members of council. This report before you seeks approval for the town's 2025 Asset Management Plan. The Asset Management Plan builds upon the progress made in the previous two illustrations of the town's asset management plans and satisfies the legislative requirements. Based on replacement costs, the town has $1.2 billion in assets, with nearly 90% of the town's assets in fair or better condition. Currently, the town is funding 65% of our annual funding needs. Over the years, council has increased our contribution to capital through the budget process. While the asset management plan before you does speak to potential financial options to increase funding further, any changes in capital funding are subject to the budget process and council's approval. This evening, our consultant, Mr. Isra Ahmad from Public Sector Digest, has a brief presentation on asset management, and we will be available for any questions after that presentation.
Thank you, Tana. Good evening, everybody. I'm assuming I'm on deck right now, so I will start my video. I'm just following instructions as I see them on the screen, so pardon any delays. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Isra, and I'll walk you through our 2025 asset management plan that we completed for the town. I'm going to share my screen, so give me one moment, and we'll get started right away. So Tano touched on quite a few of the important points, and I did want to say that this has been one of the most efficient council meetings I've ever been a part of, and I'll try not to disrupt that flow. So we're going to go over very quickly the background and context of the asset management plan and why we're here, and then we'll jump straight into some key findings from the 2025 asset management plan. I am scrolling through my screen, so if you're not seeing slides change, just let me know. So very quick background. This shouldn't be new to most of you, but we are following this regulation that was passed under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act back in 2015. And the regulation requires all 444 municipalities, including Toronto, in Ontario to develop at least 3 iterations of asset management plans along with an asset management policy. And this regulation has been in place since 2022. And it's now coming to an end, at least its first cycle in 2025. These asset management plans have been increasing with complexity. You'll see here, this is what the town has gone through since 2019, beginning with completing an asset management policy. Then we did the first asset management plan for 4 assets back in 2022. The town then completed its core and non-core assets with current service levels last year. And now we supported the town in developing its 2025 asset management plans with a focus on levels of service, including proposed levels of service. So the scope of the asset management plan that you have in front of you is all assets, so core and non-core, in compliance with the regulation. And this year, as of July 2025, marks the end of the first full regulatory cycle of OREG 588. And by now, the town has again done 3 asset management plans, beginning with core assets and current levels of service, and now concluding with proposed levels of service for all assets. Going forward, the only requirement that you have is on an annual basis is completing some sort of a progress update in collaboration with yourselves as members of council and staff. There are no templates available from the ministry on what this progress update looks like, but I can infer that it likely is about implementing the asset management plan. And then every 5 years going forward, the regulation requires an update of the comprehensive asset management plan itself. There's nothing preventing you from doing more frequent asset management plans, perhaps every couple of years or every 3 years or so. But from a regulation point of view and staying in compliance, the next asset management plan will not be required from the town until 2030. So progress since the last asset management plan, which was done last year, some really critical refinements and improvements in the town's data sets, beginning with bridge inspections. The town stays in complete compliance with the Ontario Structures Inspection Manual, which mandates that municipalities inspect their bridges and structural culverts. So the town did one in 2023, and as required, they're supposed to be done on every 2-year cycle. So the next one will be done. It should be actually expected later this year. It's likely in the process of being completed. We just didn't have it in time to integrate the data into this asset management plan. But that's an example of an important update. And once you have it, new data can be brought into the town's asset management system, and perhaps an update can be made very quickly. The other big improvement from last year was a big focus on refining replacement costs. Replacement costs, as you can surmise, are very important for long-term forecasts, for identifying the implications on the town's financial strategies and planning, and of course, eventually budgeting, and then the taxpayers' pockets. So a lot of effort has gone into making sure that the data on replacement costing is accurate and as precise as can be. The other last one from an asset management, a physical asset management point of view was similar to the bridge inspections, which is pavement inspection. So the town carried out a comprehensive pavement inspection study of all of its local collector and arterial roads. And this provided some very important information that we brought into the asset management plan. So some key indicators from the EMP, keeping in mind we've distilled 150 plus page document into a few slides to respect brevity. The first one I want to mention is the total current replacement cost of the town's infrastructure and other capital assets. And that is about $1.2 billion. And with the road network comprising the majority of it, followed by stormwater infrastructure. This is fairly consistent with other municipalities where road programs usually take up most of the infrastructure portfolios, and the next 2 or 3 are typically utilities, whether it's water, wastewater, or storm. Occasionally, we do see facilities up there as well. So one of the big takeaways is the current state of the infrastructure you have at the town. So 90% of the town's infrastructure portfolio is in fair or better condition. It's a pretty good indicator. It likely reflects a combination of things: really good asset management practices, trying to stay proactive, keeping up with repairs and maintenance needs, but also doing inspections. You will see that about 10% of assets are in poor or very poor condition. Some of those assets do, in fact, require rehabilitation and replacements and repairs. Some simply have reached the end of their useful life and are considered poor or very poor, but they may, in fact, continue to operate safely and effectively, and which is why doing condition assessments and developing good risk models becomes really important to help you prioritize which assets actually get the attention that they need at the right time. This is that same pie chart, just broken down into the 10 asset categories that we looked at. You'll see that most of the big infrastructure groups are in fairly good shape. So your roads, your bridges, so from roads, bridges, stormwater, water, and sanitary, these are what the province considers core assets. So these are the critical services that you provide to your constituents. And you're not going to see too much orange or red in these areas. You'll begin to see more and more of that as you get into relatively minor assets. These assets are still very important and critical, but relative to things like bridges and large structures and hard engineered infrastructure, they are relatively minor. An example here is always land improvements. So land improvements is going to include From my perspective, a mishmash of assets like fencing and landscaping, they're not critical to really any services that are provided. And a lot of times these assets won't have actual condition inspections available. So no one's going out and looking at and inspecting fencing on a regular basis. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but they're not like bridges where you do need regular inspections. So this is an example where we might use just the age of the asset as a proxy for helping us understand its condition. Same concepts apply to a lot of the machinery and equipment assets and IT assets where they sort of function on a buy, replace cycle. They have a certain lifespan, you reach the end of it, and usually that means they're poor, although they might continue to operate well. Levels of service was an important piece in this asset management plan. So what we did is we held open-ended dialogue with all the different departments, the roads, bridges, facilities, machinery, equipment, parks, etc. And the idea was to uncover any hidden pressures or areas where the staff felt a change to service level commitments was potentially warranted and should be brought forward for your consideration and review. So we talked about everything from sufficiency and adequacy of existing service levels, and again, where changes might need to be made, whether that's increasing service levels or decreasing them. The end result from all of that is that on a programmatic level, there are no major service level changes recommended. So the recommendation is to continue to maintain service levels. And I say that in the spirit of the regulation, which I think is more about programmatic service level changes rather than one-time projects that may end up shaping service levels, so increasing or decreasing them. A good example for municipalities is, let's say, increasing the average condition of all of your roadways. That's a strategic initiative. Some municipalities might decide to decrease service levels. You don't have unpaved roads, I believe, but municipalities in your surrounding area, we're seeing an uptick in converting some of those gravel roads into paved roads. So that's an example of a programmatic change. It's a strategy, it's a commitment you're making. A project level service level change might be you're constructing a new library. So it's not that you are actively expanding the services and assets within all libraries, you're simply building a new one. So the side effect will be that you have higher service level changes. In the spirit of OREG, which is about programmatic service level changes, the recommendation here for your review is to continue to deliver services as they are delivered today, keeping in mind that specific projects, as you grow, as you upgrade, will lead to likely higher service level changes. In other cases, if you're deferring projects and you're not keeping up with the maintenance needs, that might lead to lower service level changes, or lead to lower service levels, pardon me. So funding for assets, as you know, just like with our houses and cars and other assets that we own on a personal level, municipal assets also require annual investments. We refer to this as the average annual requirement, and this is a function of the replacement cost of the assets, the rehabilitation needs, and the lifespans. So that's why those three, the replacement cost numbers are really critical, and staff spent quite a bit of time on making sure that those were as accurate as possible. So the annual average requirements, they basically tell you how much you need to either set aside in reserves for future expenditures, so you're prepared, or how much you should be spending on average in a given year to stay current with rehabilitation and replacement needs. The part that's probably not shocking to you is that these numbers are very large, they are intimidating and ominous, and very few municipalities, if any, can try to stay really close to these numbers. They are often prohibitive, but they are a necessary reference point for us to do good asset management planning. They're ambitious, but we need them to know we're headed in the right direction. When you're not setting aside sufficient funds on an annual basis, or you're not putting in the necessary funds back into your infrastructure, when you're deferring projects, because of a lack of funding, that's where you produce what's called these infrastructure deficits, which I'm sure you're quite familiar with. So we looked at LaSalle's current funding framework to come up with an assessment of how the town is performing. We split them up into two types, the tax-funded assets versus the rate or utility-funded assets. So the average annual requirements for your tax-funded assets, which include everything but water and sanitary, is about 24.8 million. And the average funding available today is about 14.8 million, which means you're producing about a gap, an annual infrastructure deficit of about 10 million. So you're funding 60% of your needs. And I'll comment on in a couple of slides on some benchmarks. On the water side, based on recent funding levels and projects and so on, it appears to be fully funded, but this again comes with some caveats. This funding level can change over time. And there's really, because we're using averages and typical funding available, this number might be inaccurate in a given year based on infrastructure needs for that particular year, but water looks to be in good shape. On the sanitary side, sort of similar to the tax-funded side, you're funding about 66% of your annual infrastructure needs. When we combine all of these together to provide a comprehensive picture, you're funding overall about 65% of the infrastructure needs that are associated with that $1.2 billion worth of infrastructure in the ground today. So what do we do from here? As this slide showed, you're funding about 60 to 66%. That means there's some deficits, there's some funding shortfall. So on the tax-funded side, that funding shortfall of about 10 million means that your property taxes would need to increase 20% if you could just snap your fingers and do it tomorrow. That's obviously not the case. We live in real life. So what we've done is we developed these phase-in periods, ranging from 5 years to 20 years. So certainly that 20%, if you divide it up over 5, 10, 15 years, it's going to mean lower and lower annual tax increases. Unfortunately, there's no, how do I put this? There's no mathematical or scientific formula that says this is the optimal phase-in period, that you should do it over 10 years or 13 years. The key thing to keep in mind here is that the longer you take, the more likely it is that a lot of the assets that are, let's say, in fair condition or poor condition are falling into poor and very poor condition, respectively. So on the opposite side, if you do it very quickly, first of all, you probably can't, given the burden it's going to place on taxpayers, and you are in the unenviable position of having to communicate with taxpayers. So that's not a good strategy. So what we try to do in our experience is stay as close as possible to that 1 to 2% range. This seems to be palatable, relatively speaking, to most councils. Again, because you have to contend with all sorts of programs and services that potentially require tax increases as well. And that magic number, I suppose, is usually in that 1 to 2% range. Same thing on the water and sanitary side. So we took a very similar approach. We looked at your revenues and we looked at the deficits and determined the phasing period and the implications on annual tax increases. As I mentioned on the water side, for now, there's 0% increase needed. You seem to be meeting your capital needs. On the sanitary side, again, that 20% increase, you'll see that divided up and split up over different phasing periods from 5 to 20 years. And similar to the tax-funded side, as you get closer and closer to 20 years, you're going to see a lower and lower annual rate increase. But keeping in mind that the assets that are, let's say, in poor or fair condition will likely deteriorate, and you might end up needing one-time injections of capital to do some emergency repairs. That doesn't mean there are emergency repairs forthcoming. It's just a more broad statement there. Reserves, certainly having some money saved is a pretty important tool to help you stabilize any tax rate increases and be prepared to meet emergency needs. So there's about $101 million as of December, end of December last year, that the town has available for non-growth assets. And these are distributed across all sorts of asset categories, from roads with about 39 million to all the way to sewer with a total of about 10.9 million. And there's also a reserve for asset repairs and replacements. That's about 7.4 million. So these numbers they're good. They reflect a certain capacity to meet unexpected projects, but also to plan for projects that might not be fully funded through grants or development charges and so on. There are, to meet growth assets or growth-related infrastructure needs, there is about $10.2 million that's available in your DCs that can help you supplement any investments in capacity upgrades and new assets that you will need as the town continues to grow. So, bigger roads, wider roads, more parks, and et cetera. I mentioned some benchmarks. So this is, I was a little bit reluctant I am a bit reluctant whenever I'm asked to produce benchmarks, simply because of so many inconsistencies between how municipalities develop asset management plan. So while there is a regulation that stipulates certain outputs, it doesn't tell you how you should get to those outputs. So municipalities take many, many different approaches. And what I don't want to do is impugn any of the work that these municipalities have done. One thing that is for sure is that at the time that I searched for these asset management plans, which was likely not longer than 2 weeks ago, the unknowns or not posted ones, it seemed like they comprised the majority of the research that I did based on this sample size. So most municipalities on this table had, as of 2 weeks ago, had not posted their asset management plans. Based on the ones that were posted, so LaSalle, you can see there is funding about 65% of its needs, contrasted with Windsor at about 80%, and then you drop off to about 46% when we look at Amherstburg. But again, this is a quick Google search, and I didn't have a chance to delve deep into these asset management plans. They're fairly lengthy documents. One thing that I did find with a couple of these, I believe Chatham, Kent, and potentially Windsor as well, was that their approach was a little bit different. They only looked at, I believe, a 10-year outlook, which can sometimes paint a very positive picture and sometimes a very negative picture. Asset management is about long-term, so perpetual asset management. That's the approach we took with LaSalle. So if Windsor is funded at 80%, it does not mean that it is funding 80% of its needs on an annual basis forever. It just means that it's got enough commitments, enough confidence to meet the needs over the next 10 years. And what happens after that is unclear. So next steps and recommendations is, number one, the recommendations we brought forward on the financial side, the analysis we presented, that's there for your review and consideration. They're not by any means a formal commitment to implement those changes. So first one is, it would be important to review the feasibility of implementing such increases. And then the next thing is to review, on a periodic level, service level goals. And so right now, again, as I mentioned in one of the slides, the intention is to maintain service levels. And they appear to be adequate, but you might do public engagement in the future that might reveal unmet needs that are really important. And at that point, you will have a more in-depth conversation with staff, amongst yourselves, amongst your constituents, on the trade-offs between different service levels and what it means to tax rates and utility rates. So it's a good idea to review service level commitments on a periodic basis, and then to continue to stay in compliant with the regulation. You should do an annual review of your asset management plan. And again, there's no template on what that looks like, but the intention is to ensure that you're following through with some of the core recommendations in your asset management plans and are moving forward. So with that, I will temporarily stop sharing, and I'm open to take any questions that council members might have.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at my council colleagues and I already see Councillor Carrick. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, two things. So first of all, would it be fair to say through you to the consultant that we are in good shape?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to finish your question, Councillor. Is that it?
Well, that would answer first.
Sure, through the chair. So you are in good shape based on the data. But again, good shape really comes down to the read you have of your community. And of course, the annual and the day-to-day numbers and feedback you're getting from staff. This is a kind of a cross-section, a snapshot in time of your assets. I have a good degree of confidence in your assets or the asset data that we've looked at. And so if I were to make a judgment based purely on that, I think having 90% of your assets in good condition or fair or better condition is a pretty good indicator. funding 65% of your annual needs is a pretty good indicator. Most of the municipalities that we come across are just on the precipice of funding about 50% or so. I've seen some that are well below that. And so keeping in mind all the caveats and all the inconsistencies between methodologies, the data indicates that the town's doing well.
Thank you. Then, so back to my previous question on a different item. The very poor section here, $56 million, I guess end of life cycle, and I know we're putting in 1 to 2%, we've been building into the budget. So maybe to our administration, clarification of end of life and understand that we have, so basically I'm looking for time here as opposed to a 20% bump. And we have, it was explained that we have reserves. We're still building some stuff and we're still gonna need more, and hopefully some help from the upper levels of government would be much appreciated. But I guess the concern is, what's an example of end of life? Just so I understand what we're talking about. Thank you.
Through Deputy Mayor and Council, sorry. I think I'll try that first, and then certainly Mr. Ahmad can jump in. So, end of useful life represents an accounting phrase of how many years we believe an asset will last. For example, a fence may, for accounting purposes, last us 10 years. So we don't typically go out and do assessment conditions and go look at fences to say, are they in great shape, or are they not great shape? Whereas we do that with roads, and we do pavement condition indexes. So for many of those assets, in particular the land improvement category, they may have reached their end of useful life from a 10-year accounting perspective, but they may be in very good shape. But there is a cost benefit to going out and analyzing and doing condition assessment on every fence in the town. So for those types of assets, we use accounting life as opposed to a physical condition assessment.
I think I was maybe looking for more of a physical bridge or something that's totally needs to be done like right away. So obviously, this puts a little bit different perspective on how we look at things for that, right?
Correct. For those more core infrastructure assets, we do condition assessments on those. And as Mr. Ahmad mentioned, most of the items that find themselves in that very poor condition are things where we're using the end of useful life or the accounting life cycle as opposed to an actual assessment condition.
Okay, thank you. So again, my concern is just the impact financially that we have to come up with at budget time. So understanding that makes it a little less muddy and maybe not as expensive, but still going to be expensive down the road. Thank you.
Councillor Burns, I recognize you, sir.
Thank you. In your report, you have all kinds of numbers that go all kinds of different figures. And one report on, well, your page 141, if I add the two together, it looks like an increase to the tax base of 6.3%. And your final on 152, it's an increase of 1.9, and then another increase of 1.8, which comes to 3.7. And I guess these numbers to me are 100% unacceptable. Because if you're starting with that base, either one of those, but maybe you can explain them to me. But if I add those together, that means that starting budgets, I'm either going to be 3.7% increase or a 6.3. And neither one of those in this economic climate are anywhere close to what I could put my hand up for in a budget when I consider all the other things like wages and inflation, cost of doing business. I mean, we'd be looking at about 12 or 13% increase. So I don't know if you can explain those things, and as this report is presented, I certainly cannot reaffirm our business plan for 2025 without some discussion with our administration, which has nothing to do with you, sir, and the total impact of what this really means to our budgets before we go anywhere. And I put a rubber stamp and say I'm voting for this. So if you could explain those, I'd greatly appreciate it, and maybe get a better understanding of the impact of those. And I did understand the other part of putting it off for 20 years, but again, I think the failure of doing that at 0.9% would just mean we're going nowhere. So if you could comment on those comments, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. So, I mean, Councillor, you certainly raised some very important points, and these are challenges that almost every municipality contends with when they see these numbers. So the first thing I would say is that the math you're seeing reflects the infrastructure that you own. There's really no way to circumvent that. This is the reality. That's why we present different phasing periods. It is what that essentially means. If you reframe the discussion a bit, the different phasing periods might mean you have a certain impact on your service levels. So you might see some assets that are in great shape today, but perhaps your constituents are okay with seeing them in slightly worse shape. It's not the end of the world if that's the case. The other tool that the town has available is what's called risk assessments and risk models. And what that says is this document, these numbers you're seeing on the financial side, they reflect all of your assets. They are agnostic about risk assessments. The risk models that are then used by municipalities help you prioritize which assets are most important to the community along different dimensions, whether it's money, it's quality of life, the health and safety, optics, and that helps you narrow the list of assets down, let's say from 100 assets that need work every year to potentially 75 assets, and that cuts down your annual funding. What we cannot do in a report like this is narrow it down to that degree of granularity. However, those risk models have been built in conjunction with staff, and those are risk models you apply, let's say, on a shorter term, perhaps a 1 or 2 year term, to help you reduce the annual tax burden or the annual expenditures or the annual financial burden that you might take on in a given year. These numbers, again, are about all of your assets. They reflect the needs associated with all of your assets. Risk assessments are then used to reduce some of those implications on a year-by-year basis.
I see our CAO, sir.
Perhaps I can add a bit of context to the question in the report, Councilor Burns. Just to be clear, the report before Council tonight is just to receive the asset management plan. It is a requirement. Again, we're making no budgetary decisions at this point in time tonight. So I just want to make that clear, certainly for the viewing audience, those members that are here today, as well as members of Council. I think it might be beneficial to take a bit of a step backwards and to understand why this is before Council tonight. The province has mandated that municipalities conduct, engage consultants if they need be, and provide members of Council through this process a asset management report. There's a number of phasing processes. I don't know what phase we're in at the current time in terms of what we provide to members of Council. But the genesis behind this is really about what we're talking about and the questions that you're asking tonight. For many, many years, municipalities across Ontario didn't pay any attention to capital. They built something and they just assumed, wrongfully, that it would last forever and that there would be no consequence to, over time, as to what the implication was to replacing those assets. And so what the government has done is, back probably 20 years ago, they went through a gap analysis in terms of what the infrastructure gap in Canada was. In Ontario, certainly AMO, FCM were very frontline with those reports at the time. And they've identified this process to really bring to light for members of Council what the assets are of the municipality, what condition they are in, and what the funding requirements are to replace them and keep them in the state that they are. And so what you're seeing here tonight, and as our consultant has indicated, the data is showing this, that if we want to maintain our assets at the most optimal stage, we would require an additional $10 million in the budget. We realize that getting that anytime, regardless of the current conditions or not, would be extremely difficult in a one-year time frame. If you really think about it from our perspective, I think a 1% increase in our budget is about $450,000, which would mean that we would have to increase our tax rate by about 22% to garner the amount of money we need just for this. We realize that's not possible in any one year. So we've adopted the approach, and we're probably, what we thought was going to be a 10-year plan has turned into a much longer plan in order to try to develop funding sources to accommodate future replacement as we go. And so we anticipate that we'll be, as you hear us quite often talk about at budget time, when we put in, because I think our standard rate is we put in about 2% towards a transfer to reserves to deal with asset management. And so, oftentimes council is looking for places to cut, and obviously that's not something that you feel today. It's something that will be felt tomorrow. And so we're very guarded in terms of trying not to cut that, because we know that how difficult it is to raise this amount of money over time, and that every little bit counts. And so if you think about it, if we raise taxes by 2% a year, that gets us about $900,000, give or take. That would take us about 20 years or so, if I got that right. No, sorry, 10 years or 12 years to basically fund what you see here as the unfunded portion. Whether it should be over 10 years or 20 years, it will become an annualized decision that comes to council. Our practice, our internal process, how we develop the budget, is to put a 2 percentage point when we develop the budget and present it to council. Some municipalities choose not to. I will tell you that if council decides not to put one additional dollar into that fund, which would not be administration's recommendation, but obviously that's a council decision, you would then start to see that pie chart that you saw earlier in the presentation, where the majority of our assets are in the fair, good, or very good categories. You would see that shift in terms of those assets would move towards good, fair, and then poor, because we're not putting enough money into them. That's the reality of the situation. As the consultant has indicated, it's not right or wrong. It's a risk decision that municipalities have to make. There are some things that we have no choice. Clean water, for example. We must do this. And so those are some of the things that, again, when it comes to the health and safety of residents, there are certain things that we must do, regardless of the financial consequence. We are in good shape right now. I think that having a plan that's funded by 2/3 is an admirable place to be. Ideally, we would love to be at 100%. And I think had the most recent economic costing of inflation not hit us so hard over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years post-COVID, we'd be closer to 100%. I don't think we'd be there, but we'd be closer. But what we're finding is that the cost mechanism on the inflationary side for some of the capital side is just increasing the costs faster than we can put money into the appropriate reserves and contributions. So it is a balancing act, one that we go through every year at budget time. Again, it's not today that we're deciding that. What today is about is to alert members of council, members of the public, that these are costs that, if we want to maintain our assets at the level that we are accustomed to, these are costs that we will be facing in the future. And so it's either we put money in or we accept a lower level of service. That's really, the decision point is there, and as part of the budget process, it's that careful balancing act that we do every year. So I apologize for being a little long-winded on that, but it does put some context into place in terms of why this report is before council and what it means when we talk about it at budget time.
Mr. Ferrara, I thought I saw that your hand had moved as well, sir.
I think I'd like to reiterate what Mr. Militia said to council, that these are suggestions and of what we need to get to be at 100%, not necessarily what we are advocating or asking council to approve this evening. Decisions on the budget and on our contributions are done at budget time, not this evening.
Councillor Reno.
I'm not sure who the question will go to, probably Tano because it's more personal, but we have two major projects, one that's about to happen on Front Road that's infrastructure related, and then another one a year down the road, which will see shovels in the ground on Malden Road. Both of them, first of all, what kind of condition would they be in today? And will their improvement and all the money, the 50, $60 million that's going to be spent on those two particular projects, will they move any of this metric, or is that just a small part of the business?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to the councillor, many of the items on Front Road have been capitalized and are captured in this plan. Some of those have not been capitalized because they're not completed at the end of 2024. So therefore, that will actually increase our needs for funding in the future. As we add more assets, we will need to put away a certain percentage of those to replace those in the future. So this takes into account the assets that were completed and put into service before the end of 2024, not necessarily all those that we may be opening this year or opening next year. So as we add assets to our town, we will need to put away additional funding to contribute and maintain this 2/3 funding level or 65% funding level. So the more assets we have, the more money we'll need to put away to replace them in the future.
And those assets are not all fully measured at this point, is it? Did I understand that properly?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at my colleagues for any other comments or questions for either the consultant or Mr. Ferraro. Seeing none, there's a recommendation before us. I read it, that the report of the Manager of Finance dated June 17th, 2025, Finance 12-2025 regarding the 2025 Asset Management Plan be received, and that Council approve the 2025 Asset Management Plan. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Riccio Spagnolo. Support by Councillor Carrick. Any comment on the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move to item 4, LaSalle Vipers request to sell alcohol at home games. Ms. Patty Finero, Director of Culture and Recreation, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening, Deputy Mayor Akpata and members of council. I'm just going to share my screen here. So the report before you this evening is regarding a request that has been brought forward by the LaSalle Vipers to serve alcohol during their home games at the Vollmer Center for the 2025-2026 season as part of a pilot project. They have partnered with the Goat Tap and Eatery, who would be the operator of the alcohol service, and they would operate under a caterer's endorsement from the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. So as the license holder, then the GOAT would be responsible for complying with the Liquor Licensing Control Act and its regulations. Just looking at my screen, the intention would be to serve alcohol using the Rink A, which is what the Vipers, the rink that the Vipers play in, and serving from the Richard Bondi Tournament Office, which is commonly known as the Convener's Room, and cordoning off just the area in front of the Convener's Office, as well as the small area you see outlined in yellow there within the rink, that would be where the alcohol could be consumed. Within that area, it would only be accessible from coming with inside the rink, so to ticket holders only. There would be a licensed security guard who was stationed at the entrance to that area to monitor and check for ID. And then those coming into the area would be limited to 40 people. There would be a SmartServe certified bartender in the area, as well as 2 SmartServe certified floor monitors provided by the LaSalle Vipers that would stay within that area. Just to give you a visual, just from a bigger perspective, that's the entirety of the rink there. You can see it's directly across from the concession, and the area outlined in yellow there is just that small area outside of the tournament office and inside the rink. So as I mentioned, the area would be capped at 40 people inside that area. The license capacity is actually 65 when working with LaSalle Fire Service. However, in order to kind of align with the alcohol risk management policy and the less stringent requirements for smaller crowds or groups, we felt that adhering to this would allow us to pilot this project in a more financially manageable way while still meeting the safety and risk management standards within the policy. So our alcohol risk management policy does outline a number of event staff that are required based on attendance. So as I mentioned, that's why we're looking at going with the capacity of 40 people to test this out. And within the policy, events that have less than 41 people do not have to have the requirements of the Smart Serve bartenders, the number of floor monitors, or paid duty police officers. However, the GOAT Tap and Eatery will still provide one security guard who is licensed. They will also provide one Smart Serve certified bartender, and the Vipers will provide 2 volunteers who have Smart Serve certification to act as floor monitors. They intend to start the alcohol service 45 minutes prior to the start of the game, and then would conclude when there are 10 minutes remaining in the third period. There would be a method, as I mentioned earlier, of checking for ID verification for those who are 19 years and older, and those would be verified through a wristband to ensure proper identification. One of the benefits to having this partnership and with certainly with the GOAT is that they are operating under their own liquor license, so the responsibility to adhere to the regulations of the AGCO lies with them, which significantly reduces our organizational risk. And the GOAT certainly has a strong incentive to maintain its good standing and protect its own license, its business license, through compliance and responsible service. We have worked with the Vipers and the GOAT to try to find flexible and responsible ways to support them as a community partner, however, while still aligning with our policies and risk management practices. The requirements that are outlined in the alcohol risk management policy, such as mandatory security and floor monitors, can pose a financial challenge in a smaller scale setting like this. Typically, these types of things happen in the larger events that take place at our event center with a much larger capacity. So by starting with this limited capacity, it gives us an opportunity to pilot the initiative in a lower risk environment. But I do want to note that if it proves successful, we may see the Vipers and/or the GOAT return to council for a request to explore potential adjustments to the policy so that they could offer this service in a financially sustainable manner, but at the same time continuing to prioritize safety and risk mitigation. Certainly, if council approves this tonight, we would update the agreement and the insurance that we have with the LaSalle Vipers to reflect this decision. So we are recommending that we move forward with this. We are looking for a resolution to do so, and I believe that we have members from LaSalle Vipers here to speak as well.
Thank you, Ms. Finero. As I look at the document that's been given to me, we have one registered delegate, Mr. Joe Donato, Vice President of Hockey Operations and Business for the LaSalle Vipers, who is here. Mr. Donato, if you'd like to come forward, you've got 5 minutes for a presentation, sir.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of council. On behalf of the LaSalle Vipers Ownership Group, John Savage, Stephen Savage, Brian Schwab, we'd like to thank the employees of the town of LaSalle, the Vollmer Complex, for everything they do for us. Members of council, Mayor Crystal Meloche, thank you for allowing us and trusting us with this request for sales at the Vipers game for alcohol. I'd also like to thank Matt Kamza, a local entrepreneur from the GOAT, assisting us with this plan. I think it's been a pretty easy transition dealing with Patty and Scott and getting this to move forward as quick as possible before the season starts in the next 3 weeks. That's all I have, and thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donato. Looking to my council colleagues, Councilor Reacher Spagnolo.
Thank you, through you. I think it was a very well-written report, and I like the partnership between the GOAT and the Vipers. And I also like that the GOAT is responsible for for the bartender as well as the security guard, which alleviates some stress on the municipality as well. I do have a question in regards to the pilot. Is the pilot the whole season, or is it half the season and then we revisit? If you can answer that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. For the purposes of this report, yes, it is for the entire season, and then we would reassess and come back to council, unless, of course, the Vipers and the GOAT piloted and it does not prove to be financially feasible to continue. They may wish to discontinue it prior to the end of the season.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Burns.
What's in it for us? You talk about a nice arrangement with them, but what's in it for the town? What revenue comes to the town of LaSalle as a direct to us? Are they paying rent? There's no agreement here that tells me there's any money at all coming to us. And then if that is the case, why would we take the risk?
Thank you, Councillor Burns, for the question. I don't have the exact details in terms of the revenue. The Vipers, we do have an agreement with the Vipers in which they do pay rent for the use of their ice for practice and games, as well as their dressing room area and the spaces that they use. Financially beyond that, I don't know at this point that there is a direct benefit I can identify other than trying to be a willing and cooperative partner with them to encourage sales for their games and help them to they're trying a new initiative right now, which they hope that this will benefit the people who attend their games, and that could expand in the future to additional partnerships.
Well, two things, I guess. Number one, if there's no additional money for us, I don't think we need to take that liability. The Vollmer is a family-friendly community venture, and I just can't see alcohol in there. So I'll reserve my decision with my vote. Thank you. No response.
Councillor Carrick.
Okay, I'm of the other opinion. We've had events there in the past where alcohol has been served. So I'm not worried about that. They're kicking in the insurance and they're working it out with our municipality. I think if, as a willing partner in trying to help boost sales and people coming as an option, I think that's necessary, and I think that things aren't easy right now. And if the extra 40 people have a pop, as long as it's under the guise of doing it legally, I'm okay with that. You go to a Spitfire game, they're right against the glass holding the beer, or a pop. So at the end of the day, if it helps a little bit and we're good partners, I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Looking to my council colleagues for any other comments or questions for Ms. Finero. Seeing none, there's a recommendation before us that the report of the Director of Culture and Recreation dated June 27th, 2025, CR 2025-15, regarding the request from the LaSalle Vipers to sell alcohol at home games in accordance with the Town of LaSalle's Municipal Alcohol Risk Management Policy be received, and that the request be approved in accordance with the Town of LaSalle's Municipal Alcohol Risk Management Policy, MGEN 005. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Riccio-Spagnolo. Looking for support. Support by Councillor Reno. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries.
Opposed. Thank you.
I've been told by the clerk, sir, we'd have to do a recorded vote for everybody. We just don't record the nays.
Would request a recorded vote.
Councillor Burns has asked for a recorded vote, starting on the left and moving across. Councillor Riccio-Spagnolo, how do you vote? In favor. Councillor Carrick?
In favor.
In favor. Councillor Burns?
Against?
Opposed. Councillor Reno?
In favor.
In favor, the motion carries. Madam Clerk, have you noted how people have voted? Thank you. Item 5, the installation of Remembrance Day crosswalk at Normandy at the Cenotaph Crosswalk. Mr. Mark Beggs, Manager of Roads and Parks, will present the report. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and members of council. Tonight before you is the report that came from a request from council to look into some options for a Remembrance Day crosswalk. Public Works reviewed the location and some neighboring municipalities of what they've done, and also our specialty non-traditional crosswalk policy to see if this initiative fits within that policy. In going through the policy, administration feels that it does meet the requirements to fulfill our policy. The only slight difference is this location was not identified in the policy, but due to its proximity to the Cenotaph, administration feels that this would be a great location for a Remembrance Day crosswalk. Regarding the design of the crosswalk, we've looked at doing something very similar to what our neighbors in Amherstburg did, with a red and white block striping and a black simple silhouette of a lone soldier with the phrase "Lest we forget" on each end of the sidewalk. This design is thought to be respectful, simple, and impactful. The cost of this project is just around $3,000 for the painting, and it's going to be done by one of our local contractors. The work would be done at night to limit the impact on the traffic on Normandy, because it is a busy road. We will have to close the road, and we will bring in road staff to help close the road for the painting. As far as maintenance of the crosswalk, for the initial phase, we would do some touch-up painting or even repainting the entire thing over the years that we have it. And if it turns out to be something that we're very happy with and we want to keep it for the longer term, there might be some other options that are a bit more expensive, but would be a long-term system. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Councillor Carrick.
Sorry, just follow up on the quality of the paint. Are we talking a 1-year trial, or is it good for more than one? And if that's the case, and I don't think there's a problem with making sure we use good quality paint so it lasts for more than 1 year. I'm okay with that, depending on what your response is.
Yeah, it's going to be painted with full road paint, so highest quality type of paint. It's not going to last 10 years, but it should look really good for a couple of years, and it is an easy design that we can touch it up if where the tires are running over it, that the red wears off. I would suspect that the red may wear the worst.
Okay, thank you, and I just want to make a quick comment now. I'd like to just thank the Deputy Mayor for bringing this forward. I think that was a great touch of class for our veterans. Thank you.
Councillor Reno.
My question to administration is, we also have a flag project that we've committed to. What is the cost of the flag project compared to this?
I think you're referring to the banner project. I don't know exactly what the cost of I don't think we have that just yet. Again, we do the Remembrance Day banners every year. And so it's a takeoff on that, so it's already contained within our budget. I just don't know how much that is at the moment.
Looking at my colleagues, any other questions? Seeing none, there's a recommendation before us that the report of the manager and Roads and Parks dated July 4th, 2025, PW11 2025, regarding installation of Remembrance Day commemorative crosswalk on Normandy at Cenotaph Crosswalk be received, and that administration be directed to proceed with the installation of Remembrance Day commemorative crosswalk at the existing crosswalk located on Normandy Drive at the Cenotaph at a cost of $2,985 plus HST. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Councillor Riccio-Spagnolo. There's a motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Item 6, Internet Voting Service Provider 2025 Municipal By-Election and 2026 Regular Election. Jennifer Strologo, Director of Council Services, will present the report.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of Council. I'm here this evening requesting direction to proceed with awarding the contract for our Internet Service Provider. The RFP was issued back in June and then closed beginning of July. We compiled a three-person committee to evaluate the RFPs. We received 4 bids, and from those bids, Comitia was the successful proponent, and we are looking this evening to get direction to award the contract to Comitia. This provider will provide internet service, the internet platform for both the by-election and the regular election next year. So subject to any questions, this is what we're looking for this evening.
Looking to my council colleagues, Councilor Reno first, please.
Should we expect any more costs to be incurred? I know that at a previous meeting back in April, we talked about a number of $149,000 that was already put aside, and now this is just coming in a couple $1,000s more than that. Are there any more hard costs that we should expect, whether it be staffing or anything like that?
Yes, so we will be expecting another cost of around $9,000 for our voter management tool, where we manage the voters list. So that's about another $8,000 cost that we will receive toward the end of the year. There are additional staffing costs. We have seconded a member of the Council Services Department to provide assistance for the next 3 months for the election. So that is Maddie Larondo, who is our current reception clerk. So we've replaced that position. So those are the fixed, those are the costs right now. There are some supply costs, but those are negligible.
And does that include the mailer that would have to go out with all the ballots?
Yeah, so this $151,000 includes the preparation, printing, and mailing of the voter information letters for both elections.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Carrick?
I'm just going to say I'd like to thank administration for all the work and the fact that we called the by-election, which is absolutely necessary. I think then the future election, this covers both. So for a little bit more money, and again, it's well worth it. But I also think that I'd like to thank you guys too for all the hard work you've done and will be doing in the next 2 elections. And I appreciate that. And I will move this recommendation.
So we've got a mover for the recommendation, support by Councilor Riccio Spagnolo. On the floor is the following recommendation: that the report of the Director of Council Services Clerk dated July 22nd, 2025, report CS 2025-005, regarding Internet Voting Service Provider 2025 municipal by-election and the 2026 regular election be received, and that the contract for the Internet Voting Provider for the 2025 by-election and the 2026 regular election in the amount of $151,083.90 exclusive of HST be awarded to Comitia Canada, Inc., and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to execute the necessary documentation to give effect to said contract. Motion on the floor. Any questions on the motion? I have one for probably the clerk, and I think I know this already. All of the data will be staying in Canada, of course.
That is correct.
Thank you, ma'am. Question, there's a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Section I, the consent agenda, the 2025 second quarter property tax write-offs. There's a recommendation before us that the report of the Supervisor of Revenue dated July 4th, 2025, report FIN 13, 2025, regarding the 2025 second quarter property tax write-offs be received. Moved by Councilor Carrick, support by Councilor Burns. Any discussion on the motion or any questions on what's before us? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. I-2, summary of reports. You've got that information before you. There's a recommendation that item 1 and 2 on the consent agenda for July 22nd, 2025 be received. Moved by Councilor Reno, support by Councilor Riccio Spagnolo. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Item J, committee matters. Seeing none, questions and statements by council members. Councilor Carrick.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration. So, as of July 27th, I believe, the roundup or the roundabouts going in, San Jose Parkway and Heritage Drive. So I guess the concern I have is the intersection's being completely closed off. So the rerouting of the traffic, I guess, will be, on Heritage will be pretty substantial going to the outlet mall. And then there's a lot of construction going to the Demore Development and Construction. Have we looked at routes, or are we got anything in the plans to deal with that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know the exact detour routes myself. I know that there are detour routes in place, and there are specific routes for the construction traffic. I believe Demore, I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say what I think what my guess is, but I know that we worked pretty hand in hand with the developer to make sure we had the proper detour routes for both regular traffic and specific to their construction traffic.
Thank you. I know it's only for 2 months, hopefully, but I mean, it's still going to be pretty disruptive, especially with the amount of traffic going in and out of there. So thank you for your response.
Looking at my colleagues for any other, I have one. Councillor Regis Spagnolo, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Osborne. Do we have an update on the Front Road construction and a start date for that, please?
I believe we're looking at, I think 2 weeks from this week, so Monday. 2 weeks from Monday was what I was told last.
Again, polling my colleagues. Seeing no further, just wanted to reach out to Mr. Osborne, as at the opening of the groundbreaking, had occasion to speak with our MPP about, of course, my favorite topic, Phragmites, getting Phragmites designated as a different sort of weed in the province of Ontario. Had occasion to speak with the MPP, who was not objecting to it, and I will be connecting members of our team as well as some of the people in the county that are working with me on Phragmites with our MPP to move this discussion forward to see if we can't get it from noxious to invasive, or the other way, invasive to noxious. Thank you very much. Closed session, seeing no closed session today. Section N, bylaws. There's a recommendation that the following bylaws be given a first, second, and third reading and finally passed. Bylaw 2025-64, being a bylaw to appoint provincial offences officers. Bylaw 2025-65, being a bylaw to appoint inspectors to enforce maintenance standards under the Residential Tenancies Act 2006. Bylaw 2025-67, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a medical tiered response agreement between Essex Windsor EMS, the City of Windsor, and County of Essex Fire Services. Bylaw 2025-68, being a bylaw to authorize a site lease agreement with TELUS Communications, Inc., and that the following bylaw be given a third and final reading and finally passed. Bylaw 2025-21, being a bylaw to authorize a franchise agreement between the corporation of the town of LaSalle and Enbridge Gas, Inc. Looking for a mover and seconder on all bylaws. Moved by Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Confirmatory bylaw, that the confirmatory bylaw 2025-69 be given a first, second, and third reading and finally passed. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Regis Spagnolo. The questions on the floor, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries. Before you is a schedule of meetings. Thank you very much for those who attended in person and to our viewing audience. It's now time for adjournment. Thank you very much.